which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Patchen?
Here.
Mrs. Gadsden?
Present.
Mr. White?
Here.
Mr. Garnett? Excused. Ms. Angela Everett?
Here.
Mr. Munoz?
Here.
Mrs. Galbo?
Here.
Mr. Zoff?
Here.
Mrs. Thompson?
Here. Dr. Walker, would you like to review the fire exits?
The fire exits are located in front of me and behind of you. So if there's an emergency, please exit through those doors.
Would you like to introduce our workshop?
I would. Tonight, the presenter is me. I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the thinking behind the Common Core. So I'll go over there and tell you more. There's a lot of different feelings about the Common Core. And when people look at the Common Core, they say, is this good? Is this good for kids? Is this good for us? Is it good for New York State? Where did it come from? Why do we have it? There's a lot of questions around it. And so I thought tonight I would talk a little bit about how the government, starting at the just really globally and then right down to New York State. Why did New York State move to the Common Core? Because it was a choice for states to adopt the Common Core. And why did that make sense? And why does it make sense to other states as well? So that's what I'd like to talk about this evening. So let's just look from a global point of view. And in the United States, we constantly are asking ourselves, does every student in the U.S. have access to a world-class education today? And that's a big question because we hear a lot of bashing about, education in the United States or even education in New York State. And, look at what they're doing in China, or look at what they're doing in Japan, or look at what they're doing in Germany. We're really not comparing apples to oranges when we look at the school systems from other countries. But the bigger question, I think this is a good question, is do we have access to a world-class education? And what does that mean? And what does a world-class education look like? Because if you've read if you've read about, how the world is really shrinking, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, we know that we're in competition with everyone in the world. We used to just be in competition maybe with people in our state or in our country, but now we're really in competition with the whole world. Now, from a federal point of view, this is pretty alarming. When we think about a graduation rate, now this is across the United States. This is not here. It's not New York State. It's across the United States. We have across the United States about an 86% graduation rate. And so this little diagram kind of walks through what does that mean in terms of number of students and student success if we started with the green at the top, 100 students. So let's think about 100 students have entered the 9th grade, and this is sort of the average of what happens in the United States. If you go to the right, we see that there is about a 3.5% dropout rate per year, which means that 14 of those 100 students do not graduate, which leaves 86 students who do graduate, and about 60% of those go on to college. That means that 40% do not go to college, 19 go directly into a vocation or the workforce. Maybe they were at BOCES, they have a skill or a trade that they go into. And we know that 15 of those students, of those original 100 students, have no secondary or post-secondary job skills. So you do the math, and that leaves 52. Just about half of the students go to college. And interestingly enough, about half of them go to a 4-year college initially, and about half, 26, go to a 2-year college. For those students who go to a 4-year college, those 26 students from the 100, or about 1/4 of the original 100, 14 of them don't graduate. They never graduate from college, a 4-year college. And only 12 of the original 100, or 45%, are graduating from a 4-year college. When we look at the other 26 students from the original 100, 20 of them in a 2-year college, 20 do graduate and 6 don't. So of the original 100 students, we have 12 and 20, or 32 children, or 1/3 of those 100 that are graduating from a 2 or 4-year college, and 19 who are in the workforce. And that's pretty alarming when you think about, who, where, how do we support those people? Well, we all know how we support those people. And that becomes, instead of a plus to our economy, it becomes a drain across the United States. We also know that we have this global economy, and it's really changing the nature of work. If you take your income tax return to a big company these days, probably no one in the United States is figuring out your taxes, because they've hired a group of people over in a third world country or India, someplace, who are doing your taxes over the line. Okay? So the jobs don't exist in the United States. And jobs that once required a high school degree and that paid a sustaining wage are really disappearing off the face of the United States, because we farm those skills out. Ford Motor easy for you to say, Ford Motor Company, #1 top producing plant is in Mexico, not in the United States. And many of our low-skill jobs have gone overseas. We know that. You call for computer support, you're not talking to somebody in the United States most of the time. And furthermore, jobs that were once thought to not need a post-secondary skill, you can no longer do. For example, many times students used to say, well, I'm going to drop out of school, I'm really good with engines, I'm going to fix a car. Well, 30 years ago, our cars had more circuitry in it than the first lunar landing module 30 years ago. You open your car, you don't see an engine, you see a computer. And every part of that car is a computer. You cannot fix cars unless you have a background in computers. So there are many, many positions now that once were hands, we did it because of our hands, are now really a cognitive job. So today, roughly 2/3 of all new jobs come from a post-secondary education, not necessarily a 4-year college, but a 2-year college. And this is going to increase in the future. So, thinking about education, I'm still talking about across the United States. 7 out of the top 10 fastest growing occupations in the United States require a post-secondary degree. And you can see that many of them are requiring 4 years of at least 4 years of college, if not more. And this comes from the U.S. Department of Labor. This is pretty obvious that the higher you go in education, the better your annual earnings might be. And you can see that the best degree is the professional degree, and then we lose money when you get a doctorate. So don't go that far. Don't pay for that. But it's a huge difference when you really think about the kinds of salaries that you can be making because you have a good education. This is surprising to me when we begin to look at, again, I like this graph because we're looking at and comparing the level of schooling, the type of job or the type of degree that you have, and unemployment rate. And what this shows us is that the highest unemployment rate is at the lowest level of skill. So by increasing our skills, we have a better chance of getting a job. Now let's take a look at what New York State is looking at. From New York State's point of view, here are New York State graduation rates across the United States. And there's two pieces of information that we're looking at, and you're going to see this graph in a different format in a different slide. In the blue, we see graduation rate, and it looks, 73%, 84%, maybe not so bad. Then in the red, we're comparing the graduation rate to those students who have met ELA and math aspirational performance measures. These measures mean that you have in ELA a 75 or above, and in math an 80% or above. And this is what the state is finding. You need to have that average to be successful in college, to go to college and be successful. And that's one of the reasons why we see such a high dropout rate when smart students with good grades, get into college, because they find out that they were not as prepared for college as they thought just because they graduated. Graduation is not enough. You have to have a much higher percentage of that at the graduation rate. Here's the same slide again, showing us the same information again in a different format, where 74% of all students were graduating. Only 35% of them, or only really half of them, are really prepared for college and careers. And when you begin to look at these numbers, it can be quite alarming. In some cases, it's more than half. It's much more than half the students are not prepared for college or careers. So let's think about the Common Core for a minute, whether we like the topics that were chosen. One of the things that the Common Core attempts to do is raise the bar and put more rigor at a much earlier level for students. And you can see why those people that put together the Common Core, what they're trying to accomplish here. Because we are graduating students who are not ready to go and be successful in life. And when we look at across the United States, and then again, at the federal level and the global level, we have to begin to ask ourselves, is our curriculum going back to the way things used to be, is that good enough for us to compete against, our students have to compete against in a world that's going to be very different from the world that we currently live in. Many people question at a very young age, at the kindergarten level, the kinds of vocabulary that we hear students using. Well, my nieces and nephews are all grown and have gone to college, and they're grown up now, but when they were children, young children, 4 and 5 years old, they knew every name of every dinosaur. Names I never heard of. They could pronounce every one of them. Because when we begin to work with students when they are young, they love vocabulary, and they particularly love showing their Aunt Barb that they know way more than she does about just dinosaurs. And so when we hear the vocabulary coming home from kindergarten, first grade, second grade, what we have to remember is it's a first exposure. The Common Core is built what's called a spiraling curriculum. And so what's brought up in kindergarten, we will see again in 3rd grade, we'll see it maybe in 4th and 5th, but it becomes more and more sophisticated as the students get older and older. So they're learning about a lot of sophisticated things, but I have to tell you, they're not learning it at an adult level. They're learning it at a child level. So again, when you look at that Common Core, you've got to think about some of the reasons why the Common Core has come, and it's really challenging us to help make our students be competitive in a world that's very different than the world we're currently living in. So I'll stop with that and ask if there are any questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lockwood. May I have a motion for executive session?
Motion to adjourn to executive session to review the employment history of a particular individual, and the board will return as soon as possible.
Second.